In the wild, the fear of human, potential predators, and scarcity of food creates an environmental condition that is able to sustain a certain number of gooses only. As a result, their population size is often kept in check. However, in settings such as Woodward Park, the goose's interaction with humans will often result in overcrowding because of human interaction. Gooses that are fed by humans will develop a habit that will cause them to be reliant upon human interaction. As a result, many of the gooses that depend on human interaction will spend less time scavenging for food and more time in fitness and reproduction, which could prove to be problematic because this creates an overcrowding environment and atmosphere for many of the gooses that are present.
What is competition? Competition is the interaction between organisms in which both species are harmed. There is limited supply of at least one resource, such as food, water, or territory. There are 5 types of competition. First, interspecific competition is where there's competition between members of the same species. Second, the interspecific competition is where there's competition between members of different species. Third, the direct competition is when it occurs when individuals compete with each other directly for the same resource. Fourth, indirect competition occurs when organisms use the same resource but don't necessarily interact with each other. And finally, interference competition is when there's a deliberate displacement of individuals by their competitor. The less competitive individuals are forced to go elsewhere to find resources. Competition could lead to competitive exclusion, stable coexistence, or niche differentiation. However, for competitive exclusion, it states that 2 species with similar ecological niches cannot exist in the same environment. One will always outcompete the other, so the more competitive species will stay and subordinate. One will either adapt or be excluded by either immigration or extinction. While competition in the natural world is imminent, it doesn't always happen in the same way. In this video, we could observe that there is interspecific competition occurring within these geese because there are only geese fighting for limited resources. The limited resources they have is food because the environment they are located in is very dependent on human interaction. It could also be that fresh water does not have any fishes due to the location, the amount of species there is, or the massive declines in fish populations due to human overharvest. We could observe how a human is feeding the geese, which is an energy source for them. They come near this human and follow them to obtain some of this food and be able to survive. When an animal has found a space that contains all the resources it needs to survive, it wants to hold on to it. This is why animals are territorial. They defend their territory which contains those resources. Animals defend territories for many different types of resources, which are a convenient source of fresh water, supply of vegetation, and a stable source of prey, which we could see in this video. In conclusion, competitive interactions over time manifest themselves in physical and behavioral adaptations that shape the evolution of a species. Human activity, invasive species, climate change, and the environmental pressure are constant stressors on ecosystems, making resources less available and of less quality. These stressors affect the way that organisms compete with each other and their ability to survive and coexist.
The geese in Woodward Park occupy their own ecological niche. The population of the species can be limited by the environment's carrying capacity. The environment is able to limit their growth rate by slowing it down when resources become limited and stopping the growth rate once its capacity is reached. As the carrying capacity is reached and resources become limited, that's when an increase in interspecific competition occurs, allowing for specific individuals within the population who are better adapted for the environment to compete for survival. The density of a population can be regulated by various factors that can include biotic and abiotic factors. Density-dependent processes occur when population growth rates are regulated by the density of a population. Most of the density-dependent factors, which are biotic, include predation, inter- and interspecific competition, and diseases. In general, the denser a population, the greater its mortality rate. For example, during intra and interspecific competition, the reproductive rates of the individuals will usually be lower, reducing their population's rate of growth. In addition, low prey density increases the mortality rate of its predator because it has more difficulty locating its food source. Density-independent regulation is affected by many factors, typically by physical or chemicals in nature. This influences the mortality of a population regardless of its density, and this can include weather, natural disaster, as well as pollution.